Imagine watching the moon landing and seeing a flag you didn't expect. The picture comes through the same way, that grainy, impossible transmission, black and white, the surface of another world rendered in static and contrast, and the particular unreality of something too large to believe. The spacesuit is white. The figure moves the way figures move in low gravity, that slow-motion bounce that no amount of training on Earth can fully prepare you for. But when the flag goes up, it is red. A red flag with a hammer and sickle, planted in the gray dust of the sea of tranquility, and the voice that speaks into the radio that says the words that will be replayed for as long as humanity exists speaks them in Russian. You are watching this in a living room somewhere. Houston, London, Tokyo. You are sitting in front of a television and watching a different country make history first. The date is July 21st, 1969. In this room, in this moment, across 100 million living rooms just like it, something shifts. Not just pride, not just politics. Something in the story humanity tells about itself. The story that had been building for a decade. The one where the Americans were going to plant their flag on the moon and prove something about freedom and ingenuity and the American way. That story ends here, in this room, with a red flag going into gray dust. And a different story begins. The story I want to tell you tonight is not about who won the moon. It's about what losing did to the people who lost, what it made them build, who they became in the building of it, and where, 50 years later, 43 people are living on another world because two countries couldn't stand the thought of the other getting there first. Lie back. The moon is still out there. Same moon, different story. The first person I want you to know is Alexei Leonov. You can look him up in our timeline because he is real, a Soviet cosmonaut, the first human being to conduct a spacewalk. A man who tumbled outside the Voskhod 2 capsule in March 1965, while his suit inflated in the vacuum of space until he could barely bend his arms, who bled pressure from the suit manually to fit back through the airlock, who came within minutes of dying and who returned to Earth grinning. He was also a painter. He painted in his spare time, then in space, then continued painting for the rest of his life. And his paintings of the Earth from orbit have a quality that photographs do not. The photographs are accurate. The paintings are true. In this timeline, Leonov is the man who lands on the moon. He is chosen because Sergei Korolev trusts him. Korolev is the chief designer, the man who built Sputnik, who put Gagarin in orbit, who drove the Soviet space program with the particular intensity of someone who had survived the Gulag and come out of it understanding exactly what time meant and how little of it was guaranteed. In our timeline, Korolev dies in January 1966 on an operating table during a routine procedure, and the Soviet moon program slowly dies with him. In this timeline, he doesn't go into surgery. The detail that changed it, a different doctor, a different day, a different decision by someone in the healthcare bureaucracy, is small enough to be invisible. What matters is that Korolev lives, and because he lives, the N-1 rocket that had been failing continues to be improved rather than abandoned. And because it continues to be improved, it eventually works. The landing is July 21st, 1969, 11 days before the Americans were scheduled to launch Apollo 11. Leonov descends the ladder of the LK lander, the Soviet lunar module, smaller than the American one, built for one cosmonaut rather than two, and steps onto the surface of the moon at 14:17, Moscow time. His crewmate, Oleg Makarov, is orbiting above him, waiting, running the systems, alone. The person who didn't get to go, who stayed behind and kept the engine running and watched the world on the other side of 100 kilometers of vacuum. The party had prepared a statement for Leonov to deliver. 4 sentences about the Soviet Union and the workers of the world and the march of socialism. He had memorized it. He had practiced it. What he actually said, in the 2 or 3 seconds between the bottom rung of the ladder and the surface of the moon, was this: Bоже moi, my God. A religious exclamation. From a man raised to be an atheist, in a country that had been trying to abolish God for 50 years. The words came before the statement, before the training, before the politics. They came from somewhere else. Then he remembered. He delivered the prepared statement, clearly, correctly, in the voice of a man who had been told what to say and was saying it. But the 3 seconds before the statement were the ones that survived in this timeline, the ones that everyone remembers, the ones that were real. He stood on the lunar surface for 4 hours and 12 minutes. He said the shadows were absolute, not dark, absolute. On Earth, shadows have ambient light in them, scattered by atmosphere. On the moon, in shadow, there is no light at all. He stepped into a shadow and couldn't see his hand in front of his face. He said the sky was black, not the dark blue of high altitude, not the blue-black of deep ocean, black the way nothing is black on Earth, the black of a sky with no atmosphere to scatter the sun's light. He said the horizon was closer than he expected, because the moon is small enough that you can see its curvature from the surface, and the horizon curves away from you in a way that the Earth's does not. Standing on the moon, he said, you feel the sphericalness of the thing. You feel the smallness of the world under your feet. He did not want to leave. He left because the mission required it. Now, the second person. Carolyn Tanner is 24 years old on the day the Soviet flag goes up on the moon. She is watching it in a break room at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston on a television that someone dragged in from the corridor, surrounded by 30 other people who are also watching and who are, collectively, the quietest she has ever heard them. She is not yet an engineer. She has been a human computer for 2 years, which is what they call the women in the mathematics division. The ones who check the work. The ones whose calculations go into the guidance systems without their names attached to them. She has a doctorate from MIT in orbital mechanics, completed at 22, and she has applied 3 times for a role in mission planning and been rejected 3 times, and she has not given up, which is itself a fact about her character worth noting. She watches the flag go up. Around her, some people cry. Some go very still. One man, a lead flight engineer named Davis, a man she respects enormously, puts his face in his hands for a moment, then lifts it and stares at the screen with an expression she will remember for the rest of her life. It is not defeat, exactly. It is something more complicated. The expression of a man who has just understood that the race he thought he was winning was never going to end. She does not cry. She watches. Later, she will write in her journal. She kept a journal her entire adult life. 70 years of daily entries. the last one written 3 days before she died, that what she felt in that break room was not what she expected. She had expected devastation. What she felt instead was something she needed several years to name properly. She felt the future open up, not in a comfortable way. In the way that you feel when a door opens onto a staircase going down and you realize you are going to have to descend it. The future opened because losing meant the race wasn't over, and the race not being over meant that there was still something to build. Carolyn Tanner went home that evening and started a new page in her journal. At the top, she wrote, "Mars. How long?" She did not know yet, but she started thinking about it that night, and she did not stop for 40 years. In our timeline, America won the moon, and the space program slowly died of victory. The logic was brutal in its simplicity. The race had been justified by competition. When the competition was won, the justification evaporated. The budgets fell. The Saturn V rockets, the most powerful machines ever built, capable of lifting 130 tons to orbit, were retired, and 3 of them ended up as museum pieces on their sides in parking lots, too heavy to be displayed upright. The last moon landing was in December 1972. For over 50 years since, no human being has left Earth orbit. In this timeline, the budget does not fall. It increases. 3 days after the Soviet landing, Congress passes an emergency appropriation for NASA. Not the largest in history, but large, and passed with the particular speed of a legislature that has just been embarrassed and is looking for someone to blame and something to do. The something to do is money. More money, more engineers, more time, more missions. Nixon's speech, the one where he tries to be gracious and doesn't quite manage it, ends with a line that his speechwriters put in and that he delivers flatly, without conviction. The race is not over. He doesn't believe it when he says it, but it becomes true anyway. Leonov returns to Earth to a hero's reception in Moscow. That is, by Soviet standards, extraordinary. He stands in Red Square. He shakes Brezhnev's hand. He gives interviews in which he is careful and modest and says the things you are supposed to say. And then, in one interview with a French journalist, he goes slightly off script. The journalist asks what the moon felt like, and Leonov thinks for a moment and says, like, "I was the first person who had ever been anywhere." The quote travels around the world. In Houston, Carolyn Tanner reads it in the newspaper, cuts it out, and puts it on the wall above her desk. She doesn't know why exactly. She will keep it there for 30 years. The 4th time she applies for a planning role, she is offered the position. She believes this is because the review that follows the Soviet landing concludes that NASA has not been using its full talent pool. She is right. She starts work in January 1970, and within 3 months, her supervisor, a patient man named Gary Holbrook, who has spent 20 years in the Apollo program and who recognizes good thinking when he reads it, gives her more responsibility than her title suggests she should have because she is doing work that justifies it. Her first major project is a study of what a Mars transit vehicle would need to look like. Not the landing vehicle, not the surface systems. The ship that would carry people through 6 months of interplanetary space. She spends a year on it. The study is 240 pages. It identifies 47 distinct engineering problems that have no current solution and proposes research programs for 31 of them. Holbrook submits it upward. It comes back approved for partial funding. Partial. Tanner circles the word and writes next to it, in the margin of her own copy, "Start somewhere." Meanwhile, Leonov is training astronauts. He doesn't fly again. His assignment after the moon is to help develop the next generation of Soviet space program, and he takes to this with the same energy he brought to the spacewalk and the moon mission. He is not a patient teacher in the conventional sense. He is impatient, demanding, occasionally infuriating, convinced that the only way to prepare people for the specific terror of space is to make training more frightening than the thing itself. His trainees are divided on him. Some of them find him impossible. Some of them worship him. The ones who become the best cosmonauts tend to be in neither category. They find him honest, which is rarer than impossible or worshipable. He also paints. In the evenings, in his apartment in Star City, the training complex outside Moscow, he paints what he remembers of the moon. Not the official photographs. He doesn't need them. The images are inside him with a clarity that hasn't faded. He paints the shadows that are absolute, the sky that is black, the horizon that curves away. He paints the earth, hanging in that black sky, blue and white and small and impossibly precious. He gives one of the earth paintings to his daughter. She keeps it her entire life. The 1970s in this timeline look nothing like the 1970s you know. The oil crisis still happens. Watergate still happens. The Vietnam War still ends. The social and political turbulence of the decade still moves through the world. But underneath all of it, running parallel to it, is the space race. Continuous, relentless, demanding, expensive. And its demands reshape things in ways that are not immediately obvious. Both programs are pushing technology that has no other application in 1970, and that will have enormous applications by 1985. The solar panel industry, which in our timeline grew slowly from specialized military applications, grows fast here because both space programs need reliable electrical power generation for permanent installations, and neither program can afford to wait for the technology to develop commercially. The materials science that goes into heat shields and pressure vessels creates manufacturing processes that move into aerospace and then into other industries. The computing that both programs need to manage increasingly complex missions drives development faster than either side would have managed in peacetime. The race is expensive. It is also quietly productive. Carolyn Tanner notices this in her work, which increasingly involves justifying the cost of the Mars program to committees that do not naturally want to fund things they do not understand. She develops a skill for this, for translating the engineering into language that connects it to things people already care about, for making the case that the technology being developed for Mars is technology that will matter on Earth. She is right. She can show the data. The data is persuasive. She is also, increasingly, the person in any room who has read the most. About the physics, yes, but also about the Soviet program, which she follows with the close attention of a competitor who knows that understanding the enemy is a prerequisite for beating them. She subscribes to translated Soviet aerospace journals. She attends every international conference where Soviet scientists present papers. She learns enough Russian to read the technical documents without waiting for translation. She never goes to Russia in this decade. The programs are competitors, not collaborators, and the intelligence implications of direct contact are too complicated. But she builds, through papers and conferences and the slow accumulation of technical understanding, a picture of the Soviet program that is more accurate than most of what the CIA is producing. In 1975, she writes an internal memo. The memo argues that the Soviet Mars program has solved 3 of the engineering problems that the American Mars program is still working on. It identifies which 3. It argues that the American Mars program has solved 2 problems that the Soviets are still working on. It proposes, carefully, and with full awareness of how it will sound, that contact between the programs at the working level might be mutually beneficial. The memo disappears upward into the administrative structure of NASA and does not come back. She writes it again in 1977. Same result. She writes it a 3rd time in 1979, after the Soviet lunar accident, after 4 cosmonauts die in the carbon dioxide scrubber failure, after the international rescue coordination that follows the accident makes clear that the 2 programs are already in de facto contact in emergencies. This time, the memo comes back with a note attached, in the handwriting of the NASA administrator. Keep pushing. She keeps pushing. I want to stop moving fast for a moment. The script of any space program told at a distance sounds like a sequence of accomplishments. Mission, mission, mission. Problem solved. Mission, success. The numbers accumulate. The technology advances. The frontier moves. It sounds inevitable from far away. It is not inevitable. It is chosen, repeatedly, by people who know what can go wrong because they have seen it go wrong. Let me tell you about a Tuesday in October 1974. The test facility is in the Nevada desert, which is where NASA tests things that might explode, because the desert is large and the nearest town is 40 miles away. The structure being tested is a prototype of the Trans-Hab module, the pressurized cylinder that will house the Mars crew for the 6-month transit. Not the final design, a prototype, testing the pressure seals and the life support integration and the thermal regulation under conditions that simulate deep space. There are 11 people in the test facility. Engineers and technicians, mostly, the people who do the work that doesn't appear in the photographs. Among them is a man named Robert Cho, 41 years old, who has been working on the Trans-Hab pressure systems for 3 years. He is the person who knows those systems better than anyone else alive. His wife is 7 months pregnant with their 2nd child. The test begins at 9 o'clock. At 9:23, a failure in a pressure seal, a seal whose material properties under the specific combination of thermal cycling and internal pressure have not been fully characterized. A gap in the testing matrix that was identified in a review 6 months earlier and flagged as low priority allows a cascade of pressure events that the system is not designed to handle. The explosion is heard in the nearest town. 11 people, all of them. Carolyn Tanner is in her office in Houston when the call comes in. She knows 6 of the 11 personally. Robert Cho she has worked with directly, has argued with about seal material specifications, has agreed with after he showed her data she found convincing. She thinks about his wife. The congressional hearings begin 3 weeks later. She testifies for 6 hours. The questions are not always fair. Some of them are looking for a name to attach to the failure, a person to hold responsible in a way that produces a clean narrative of negligence. Tanner declines to provide this. The failure was a material property that wasn't fully characterized. The decision not to fully characterize it was made by a review board that included 27 engineers, including people who are now dead. The decision was within the parameters of reasonable engineering judgment given what was known at the time. She says this clearly. She says it multiple times in different ways as the questioning circles back trying to find a different answer. She does not get angry. She does not become defensive. She stays with the facts, which are complicated, and she refuses to simplify them for the comfort of the committee. At the end of the 6th hour, the chairman of the committee asks her directly whether she believes the Mars program should continue. She is quiet for a moment, not because she doesn't know the answer, because she is deciding whether the answer she is about to give is the one she actually believes or the one she believes she is supposed to believe. Yes, she says. Not because it's worth 11 lives. Nothing is worth 11 lives. Because stopping now doesn't bring them back, and it doesn't make the next test facility safer. Continuing, learning what went wrong, fixing it, that's the only way their work means something. The program continues. She goes home that evening and does not sleep for 3 days. This is not a metaphor. She lies in bed, and her mind does not stop, and she gets up at 2 in the morning and sits at her kitchen table and writes in her journal for hours. And what she writes is not about engineering. It is about Robert Cho and the other 10, and what it costs to want something as much as she wants this, and whether the wanting is large enough to justify the cost, and whether that is even the right question. She never reaches a satisfying answer. She writes, at the end of the entry, "Keep going. It's all there is." She keeps going. Leonov, in the same years, is carrying a different weight. The Soviet program's losses are not publicized. This is the nature of the Soviet system. Failures are classified. Deaths are unreported, or reported late, or reported without the information that would allow the public to understand what happened. Leonov knows things that the Soviet public does not know, that the world does not know. He knows about the N-1 explosions that killed ground crew in the 1960s. He knows about the cosmonauts who died in training accidents. He knows that the 4 people who died in the 1979 lunar mission were not, as officially reported, killed instantly, but survived for several hours in a failing spacecraft. He knows because Belyakov, one of the 4, was his student, one of the ones who had found him honest rather than impossible or worshipable. He learns this the way you learn things in the Soviet space program, through a late-night phone call from someone who was in the control room, speaking carefully in language that implies the thing without saying it, because saying it directly is a kind of risk. He sits with this for a long time. He paints that winter more than he has painted in years. Not the moon, not the earth. He paints the dark. Not outer space. He is careful about the distinction. But the dark that you find at the edge of things, the dark at the boundary between the known and the unknown. His wife asks what the paintings are about. He says, people who didn't come back. She doesn't ask again. He keeps training cosmonauts. He keeps pushing the program forward. He makes the calculations that everyone in this business makes, the ones where you weigh the cost of going against the cost of not going. And he keeps arriving at the same answer, and he hates that the answer is the same, and he goes with it anyway. In 1981, at a dinner in Moscow, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Gagarin's flight, a journalist asks Leonov whether he would do it again. The moon, the spacewalk, all of it. He thinks about Belyakov. He thinks about the 4 of them in that failing spacecraft. He thinks about the absolute shadows and the black sky and the earth hanging small and blue. "Yes," he says. "But I would want to know before I went that it would matter." The journalist asks if it did matter. Leonov looks at the table for a moment. "Ask me in 20 years, he says. There is a moment I want to give you in full, because summaries don't do it. It is February 1978. The Moon has had 2 permanent research stations for about a year. The American one in the Sea of Tranquility. The Soviet one several hundred kilometers east, in a region chosen for its geological interest. Both stations are small, 3 modules, 6 people maximum at any one time, designed for rotating 6-month tours. They are not in contact with each other directly. The rivalry between the programs has not evolved to the point of joint operations. They exist on the same world in the way that 2 embassies in the same city might exist, aware of each other, occasionally watching each other through long lenses, emphatically not speaking. A Soviet cosmonaut named Yuri Malyshev is conducting a surface EVA alone, collecting geological samples from a site about 2 kilometers from the Soviet base. His partner stayed inside due to a minor medical issue. Malyshev is experienced, 2 previous lunar tours, and the route is familiar, and the weather, such as it is on the Moon, is clear. At 11:43 local mission time, his life support telemetry shows an anomaly. A slow pressure drop in the secondary oxygen supply. Not immediately dangerous. The kind of thing you note and report and begin monitoring closely. At 12:09, the drop accelerates. At 12:14, Mission Control in Moscow calculates the timeline. At current depletion rate, Malyshev has approximately 4 hours of breathable air. The Soviet base is 6 hours away at EVA walking pace. There are no other options in Moscow's calculations, except one option that no one in Moscow wants to suggest, because suggesting it requires admitting that the American base is closer, and that the Americans might help, and both of those admissions are complicated. The cosmonaut at the Soviet base, who is watching Malyshev's telemetry, makes the decision without authorization. She patches through to the American base's radio frequency. The emergency frequencies that both programs use are technically standardized, a legacy of a 1967 international agreement that everyone filed and no one expected to use. And she says in English, "This is Soviet Lunar Station Alpha. We have an emergency." The American base commander, a man named David Park, responds within 15 seconds. The relay of information takes 11 minutes. Soviet mission control to Soviet base to American mission control to NASA. 11 minutes to travel through the diplomatic channels that have to be traversed, because there are no direct channels, because no one planned for this. NASA's response takes 4 minutes. They send a rover. The rover is driven by an astronaut named Margaret Okafor, who has been on the Moon for 3 months, and who later describes the drive as the most focused 2 hours of her life. 2 hours across the lunar surface, following the GPS coordinates of Malyshev's suit beacon, through terrain she knows, but is navigating faster than the safety protocols technically allow. She finds him sitting on a rock, conserving oxygen, watching the horizon with the calm of someone who has decided that whatever happens is going to happen, and that panicking will only make it happen faster. She has a portable life support unit. She connects it. She says, in her extremely limited Russian, a phrase she has looked up in the mission manual and practiced during the drive, "Vesio budet korosho." Everything will be fine. Malyshev looks at her for a moment, Then he says, in his extremely limited English, "Thank you." They drive 2 hours back to the American base. He spends 3 days there while the Soviets arrange his pickup. He eats American food, which he finds bewildering. He plays chess with David Park, who beats him twice and loses to him twice. He sees the inside of an American lunar habitat, which is larger than the Soviet one and differently organized, and which has, for reasons he does not understand, a photograph of the Grand Canyon on the wall. He asks Park about the photograph. Park tells him it was taken by his wife before the mission, on a road trip they took through Arizona. He put it up because when the moon feels relentless, and the moon does feel relentless, the unchanging gray, the absolute silence outside the walls, he looks at the photograph and remembers that the Earth has colors. Malyshev asks if he can have a copy of the photograph. Park has a backup print. He gives it to Malyshev. When Malyshev returns to Earth, he carries it with him. He keeps it for the rest of his life. The photographs of Malyshev and Okafor walking side by side across the lunar surface, 2 spacesuits, 2 flags on their shoulders, moving together toward the American base, are released simultaneously by both governments. The Soviet government debates this for several days. The tension between admitting that a Soviet cosmonaut needed American help and the recognition that the photographs are extraordinary propaganda, but a different kind of propaganda than either side usually produces. Not, "We are stronger." Something closer to, "Look what we did." They release the photographs. The photographs travel around the world. They are on the front page of newspapers in countries that have no direct stake in the space race. Countries in Asia and Africa and South America. Countries whose populations have been watching the space race from the outside the way you watch a fight between 2 very large people and hope neither of them falls on you. The photographs make something visible that the space race has not been making visible, that the people doing this are people. They are not abstractions. They are not national symbols. They are a man running out of air on a rock in space, and a woman driving a rover faster than she should across the lunar surface to get to him, and a photograph of the Grand Canyon on the wall of a habitat because it reminds someone of his wife. Carolyn Tanner sees the photographs in the newspaper the next morning. She cuts them out. She puts them next to the Leonov quote on the wall above her desk. She writes in her journal that evening, "This is what I'm building toward." It is April 1989. Carolyn Tanner is 44 years old. She has been working on the Mars program for 19 years. She is now the deputy director of the Mars Mission Architecture Office, which is a title that means the person who knows how the whole thing fits together. The Soviet delegation is led by an engineer named Viktor Karpov, 62, who has been in the Soviet space program since 1962, and who looks like what he is, a man who has spent 30 years doing technically difficult work under considerable pressure, and who is still standing. They have met at international conferences before. They have read each other's published papers for years. They have not, until now, had a direct conversation about the actual state of their respective programs. The meeting lasts 3 days. On the first day, it is polite and careful and nearly useless. Both sides describe their programs in general terms. Both sides listen politely. Nothing is exchanged that wasn't already publicly available. On the second evening, after dinner, Karpov and Tanner end up sitting at the same table in the hotel bar, both of them having arrived separately and neither wanting to be the one to leave. There is an awkward silence. Then Karpov says, in English that is heavily accented but precise, "Your hydrogen extraction system, the one from the 1987 paper, does it work at the temperatures of the Martian surface?" Tanner looks at him. "No," she says, "not reliably below -40. You?" "Our Sabatier reactor," Karpov says. 11 months continuous operation in analog conditions. But we cannot get enough hydrogen to feed it without your extraction system working. They look at each other across the table. "We can't get to Mars," Tanner says. "Not safely, not alone." Karpov is quiet for a moment. "No," he says, "neither can we." The silence that follows is not uncomfortable. It is the silence of two people who have arrived at the same conclusion from different directions and are recognizing each other across it. They talk until 2 in the morning, not about the politics, not about what this means for the relationship between their governments, not about who gets credit for what, about the engineering, about the specific problems and the specific solutions each side has developed, and the gaps that each solution leaves, and whether the gaps fit together in a way that could work. They do. The Helsinki Agreement, not public, not announced, worked out over the following 18 months by teams of engineers from both programs meeting in Vienna and then in a rented facility outside Baikonur, is the most productive document in the history of space exploration. Not because it is visionary, because it is honest. 2 programs admitting what they cannot do, finding that what they cannot do, the other can, and deciding to stop pretending otherwise. Tanner writes in her journal after the second evening in Helsinki, "I have been trying to get to Mars for 20 years. Tonight, I talked to the person who has been trying to get to Mars for 20 years. We are going to get there." She underlines it. Not a habit of hers. She underlines it twice. Leonov is 65 years old in 1989. He is no longer training cosmonauts. He was retired from the active program in 1986, gently, with honors, with the awareness that he had earned the retirement and that the program he had built would continue without him. He paints more now that he has more time. He has been following the news about the joint Mars program negotiations from the outside, the same way everyone outside the program follows it, in fragments through official statements and rumors and the careful language of journalists who know more than they can publish. He knows more than the journalists because he knows the people involved on the Soviet side, but he doesn't know the details, and he is not certain in 1989 that it will actually happen. He says this to his wife one evening, watching the news. She tells him it will happen. He asks how she knows. She says, "Because you walked on the moon, and you came back, and then other people walked on the moon, and they came back, and now they need to go somewhere else. It will happen." He thinks about this. He goes back to his painting. He is working at this period on a series of paintings he has been developing for 10 years. They show Mars. He has never been to Mars. He has looked at photographs, at geological surveys, at the data from the Soviet and American Mars orbiters that have been mapping the surface since the 1970s. He paints from this, the way a painter might paint a landscape they have never visited, but know through maps and descriptions. The paintings show a red surface under a pinkish sky, long shadows in the early morning, the particular texture of a world that has been shaped by wind and cold and time and nothing else, no life visible, no sign of anything that has ever been here before. He paints it as a place waiting. The crew is 6 people, 3 American, 3 Soviet. The commander is Sarah Chen, 41 years old, a geologist who has spent 2 decades preparing for a mission that kept almost being canceled and kept, narrowly, surviving. The mission specialist for surface operations is Pavel Belyakov, Jr., the son of the cosmonaut who died in 1979, a fact known to everyone on the crew and not discussed, because some facts are too heavy for daily conversation and must simply be carried. The ship is called Ares. The landing site is named Tereshkova Base. The transit takes 7 months and 4 days. 7 months is a long time in a small space with 5 other people. The crew has been selected for competence and for the specific ability to function under sustained pressure with people whose language and background and institutional loyalties differ from their own. They have been tested in submarines and Antarctic stations and the lunar base. They know each other as well as it is possible to know people you met in a professional context and have since spent years training alongside. They also get on each other's nerves in the specific ways that people get on each other's nerves when proximity is inescapable. There are arguments about temperature. The Americans prefer the habitat slightly warmer. The Soviets prefer it slightly cooler. There are arguments about music. There is a 2-week period in the 5th month of transit when Mars is large enough in the observation port to show detail but still months away, where 2 crew members stop speaking to each other directly and communicate through a third, and the psychologist on board, an American woman named Dr. Park, no relation to the David Park who gave Malyshev the Grand Canyon photograph, manages the situation with the patience of someone who has been training for exactly this. It resolves. It always resolves, because the mission is larger than the argument, and everyone involved knows this, and knowing it doesn't prevent the argument, but it does eventually end it. Belyakov Jr. writes in his journal during the transit. He writes about his father, which is what he does in private that he cannot do in the crew space. He writes about growing up in a household where space was present the way weather is present, not something chosen, just the condition you live in. He writes about the photograph of the Grand Canyon that his mother kept on the kitchen wall for years, a copy she had gotten from somewhere, a reminder of the man who gave it to his father and what that meant. He writes about the day his father died. He does not write about it often, but in the 5th month of transit, in the small hours when the rest of the crew is sleeping, he writes about it at length. And what he writes is not grief exactly, but something adjacent to it. The awareness that he is here, in this ship, traveling toward Mars, partly because of who his father was and what his father chose, and that his father will never know. He writes, "I hope that going means something. I hope that going is enough." The landing. November 12th, 1994. Early Martian morning, Isidis Planitia. The surface is red in a way that the photographs have prepared you for, but that presence reveals differently. The photographs show the color, but not the quality of the light. The way the Martian atmosphere filters the distant sun into something thin and pale. The shadows long and sharp-edged. Sarah Chen steps off the ladder first. There is no prepared statement. 2 years of diplomatic negotiation about the prepared statement. Who writes it, which language it opens in, what it says about the 2 countries and the joint mission. Produced no agreement, and the no agreement was eventually formalized as a decision. No prepared statement. Whatever the crew says, they say. Chen steps off. She says, "Okay, we're here." Then she steps on to the surface. Belyakov follows 20 seconds later. He stands on the surface for a moment without saying anything. Then he says, in Russian, a sentence that translates as, "Dad, I got here." Then the others come down in pairs until all 6 of them are standing on Mars in the thin pink light of morning. Leonov is watching this on television in his Moscow apartment. He is 69 years old. His wife is beside him on the sofa. His daughter and her family are in the chairs across the room. The grandchildren still young enough that they have been allowed to stay up past their bedtime, because this is a thing worth seeing. The apartment is warm. Outside, Moscow in November is cold and dark. The television shows the grainy feed from the surface cameras. Better than the moon feed in 1969. Better resolution, less static, but still with that quality of impossible distance. The signal traveling 20 minutes from Mars to Earth, meaning that what they are watching is what happened 20 minutes ago, and nothing they do now can affect it. He watches Chen step off the ladder. He hears her say, "Okay, we're here." He is quiet for a moment. His wife takes his hand. He had been asked in the days before the landing by several journalists what he expected to feel. He had said he didn't know. He had meant it. He had been to the moon. He had stood in a place no human had stood. He knew what it felt like to be first at something enormous. He didn't know if watching someone else be first at something enormous would feel similar or different, or simply like watching television. It feels like watching television, and it feels like the most important thing he has ever witnessed, and it feels like both of these at exactly the same time, which is the paradox of being old enough to have history. He watches Belyakov step off the ladder. He hears the Russian, "Dad, I got here." He doesn't know the story, the son of the cosmonaut who died in 1979, the man he trained, the connection. He finds out later, reads the background, understands what the sentence means, but in the moment, watching the feed, he hears it the way it sounds to someone who doesn't have the context. A man speaking to someone who isn't there. A man speaking to the dead, or the absent, or the imagined, in the way that people sometimes do when they have done something enormous, and the person they most want to tell is someone they cannot reach. Leonov thinks about Korolev, his chief designer, the man who built the program that put him on the moon, who died in 2003 in this timeline, who never saw Mars, who spent his last years watching the program he built grow beyond what he had imagined. He thinks, "I wish you could see this." Then he thinks, "You built this. You can see it whether you are here or not." His granddaughter, 7 years old, is watching the television with the particular focused attention of a child who understands she is seeing something important, but doesn't yet have the framework to understand why. She turns to him and asks, "Dadushka, did you go to the moon?" He says yes. She looks back at the television. 6 small figures on a red surface, standing in pink morning light. "Will I go to Mars?" she asks. He squeezes his wife's hand. "Maybe," he says, "if you want to." It is April 2026. Tereshkova Base has a permanent population of 43 people. It has been continuously inhabited since 2009. The base has expanded 3 times. New modules landed by unmanned missions and assembled by the resident crew, each expansion increasing the habitable space and the scientific capability. 43 people on Mars. The number is both large and small. Large because 20 years ago it was 0. And 0 to 43 is not an incremental change, but a categorical one. Small, because 43 people is barely a village, because the nearest other humans are 8 light minutes away by radio, because if something goes catastrophically wrong at Tereshkova base, there is no help coming for years. The 43 people are mostly scientists, geologists, atmospheric chemists, astrobiologists, materials engineers who are also there to keep the systems running. They rotate every 14 months, which is the minimum rotation that the Mars-Earth orbital mechanics allow for with current propulsion technology. The search for life continues. This is the thing that drives the funding more than any other single factor. The public that has been paying for 55 years of the space race, through taxes, through the political support of representatives who vote the budgets, through the general tolerance for an expensive program that has not shortchanged earthly problems but has run alongside them. This public wants an answer to the question, not a maybe. Not structures in the subsurface that could be biological. An answer. No definitive answer has been found. There are candidates. The methane in the Martian atmosphere, which should not exist if Mars is geologically dead. The chemical signatures in certain soil samples that the biological explanation fits better than any purely geological model. The structures in the subsurface ice that a 2022 paper argued, carefully and with full acknowledgement of alternative explanations, might be fossilized microbial mats from a period when Mars was warmer and wetter. Might be. The scientists at Tereshkova base are the most cautious people on Earth, or off it, about these findings. They have watched, over 20 years, the cycle of excitement and disappointment that each new candidate produces. They have learned to hold the candidates lightly, to describe them accurately, to resist the pressure from both the funding agencies and the press to declare a conclusion that the data does not yet support. They are looking. They are looking as carefully as anyone has ever looked for anything. Carolyn Tanner is 79 years old. She retired from NASA in 2008 after 38 years, and she has spent the years since writing and speaking and watching the program she spent her career building produce results she had calculated but not fully imagined. She watches the Tereshkova news from her home in Houston, in the same city where she watched the Soviet flag go up in 1969 and felt the future open. The future opened toward this. She knows that. She also knows what it cost. She has a photograph on her desk. It is a photograph she has kept for decades, moved from office to office, home to office, office to home. It shows 11 names, engraved on a memorial plaque at the Johnson Space Center. The plaque was installed in 1975, the year after the explosion. She attends the memorial every October, the anniversary of the test. She is the only person still attending who was there in 1974. She writes in her journal. She is still writing the 79-year daily record that she intends to continue until she cannot. She writes about what it means to have built something that outlasted her, something that continues to go, that continues to require choices and to cost things, that has not resolved into the clean shape of completion. She writes, "I spent 40 years trying to get us to Mars. Now we are there, and the question is not answered. The question is larger now than it was. That is not what I expected, and it is exactly right." Pavel Belyakov, Jr. returned from Mars in April 1996 after 14 months on the surface. He has been back twice since then, in 2003 and in 2015. He is 61 now, and the program no longer sends crew members his age on the transit, and he knows this is the right policy, and he finds it difficult anyway. He lives in Moscow, in an apartment that has the Grand Canyon photograph on the wall, not his father's copy, that was lost somewhere in the decades after 1979. His own copy, printed from a digital file he found in an archive. He still writes in journals. He has tried, in the years since the Mars missions, to describe what the return is like, the specific difficulty of coming back to Earth after 14 months on another planet. Not the physical recovery. The body adjusts. The gravity returns to normal. Wait. The systems restabilize. The psychological return, which is different. He writes, "The hardest thing is scale. On Mars, the problems are the right size. The habitat needs a gasket replaced. The atmospheric processor is running 3% below spec. The ice extraction drill has a bearing that is wearing. These are problems I can hold in my hands. I know how to fix them. Earth has problems I cannot hold in my hands and do not know how to fix, and there are more of them, and they are louder." He also writes, "But the Earth has my children, and the Earth has the people who waited, and the Earth has color. I had forgotten how much color the Earth has. On Mars, the palette is red and pink and gray and the occasional dusty brown. The Earth is every color there is. I stepped off the plane and it was spring, and there were flowers, and I stopped walking in the middle of the tarmac and stared at them." He stood there for a full minute. The ground crew, confused, waited. He apologized. He walked to the terminal. He still thinks about those flowers sometimes, when the Moscow winter is long and gray and the sky is the color of an old blanket. He thinks they were there. The flowers were there, waiting the whole time I was gone. Leonov died in 2019. In our timeline too, actually. He is real. He lived until 2019. He died at 85 in Moscow. He never walked on the moon in our timeline, but he was the right person to have walked on it in this one, and it is fitting, somehow, that in both timelines he makes it to 85. That the man who came back grinning from the spacewalk came back from everything else too, for a long time. In this timeline, his obituaries mention the moon first, then the painting, then the trainers he taught who went further than he did, then his granddaughter, who did go to Mars in 2021, 30 years after he told her maybe. She was on the crew rotation that arrived when Tereshkova base first exceeded 40 people. She says she thought about him on the transit. She says she thought about the paintings he made of Mars from photographs before anyone had been there. She says when she arrived, the thing that surprised her most was that his paintings were right, not in the specific details. How could they be? He had never been there. But in the quality, the thinness of the light, the absoluteness of the shadows. He had understood it from the photographs the way he had understood the Earth from orbit, not just seeing, but knowing. She put one of his paintings on the wall of her bunk at Tereshkova base. It is still there. In our timeline, Artemis II is going around the moon. 4 astronauts, the first humans to leave Earth orbit since 1972. In 53 years, we have not gone further than the low orbit where the space station lives, the orbit that is so close to Earth that you can see individual cities, that you are still, in any meaningful sense, here. Artemis II goes around the moon and comes back. It is extraordinary. It is also, depending on how you look at it, 50 years late. The argument for this being fine, for this being the right pace, for the intervening decades having been necessary, is real. The technology is better. The safety is better. We understand more. The people who will eventually return to the moon will return to a better understood world with better tools and better chances of survival. The argument against is also real. 50 years is a long time. The people who built the Saturn V are dead. The institutional knowledge of how to do this at scale had to be reconstructed from documents, rather than inherited from the people who held it. Artemis, too, is extraordinary, partly because what it is doing should not, by now, be extraordinary. In the other timeline, it never stopped being done, and so it stopped being extraordinary and became something else, a habit, a practice. The ongoing decision, made and made and made again, to keep going. 43 people on Mars. Not because of Leonov exactly, though he started it. Not because of Tanner exactly, though she built it. Not because of Malishev and Okafor walking side by side to the American base, though that helped. Not because of the Helsinki Agreement, or the 11 engineers, or Belyakov's flowers, or the Grand Canyon photograph. Because of all of it. Because of the accumulated weight of everyone who chose to keep going when stopping would have been easier and more sensible and in some ways more kind. Because of the choices made in the break room in Houston when the flag went up wrong, and in the Star City apartment when Leonov looked at a canvas and tried to paint the dark, and in the hotel bar in Helsinki when 2 engineers admitted what they couldn't do alone. You are lying here in a world that went a different way, that stopped for a long time and is now starting again. Whether what comes after Artemis II is a new race or a new habit or something else entirely, that depends on choices being made now, by people who will decide whether this is an extraordinary event or the beginning of an ordinary practice. The moon is the same moon. The distance is the same distance. The question of whether humans are the kind of thing that keeps going, that question is always being answered in real time by the people who choose to answer it. Tonight, from wherever you are, the moon might be visible. The same moon that Leonov stood on in one version of history and Armstrong stood on in another, that humans have been looking at since before we were fully human. We have been looking at it for a long time. Somewhere in another timeline, a woman is in her bunk at Tereshkova Base, looking at a painting her grandfather made of the place she is sleeping, from photographs, before anyone had been here. The light in the painting is wrong in small ways, and right in the ways that matter. She is very far from anything that knows her name. She is asleep. You can be too. The moon is still out there. The going can wait until morning. Rest now.